Hi, my name is Joe Perea from the Grab Ass Fab Laboratory here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I'm going to show you guys a cheap and easy way to do graphics at home on your RC car. Here's a few examples of some of the stuff I've been doing. These are actually internal graphics, so they're on the back side of the Lexan, so any beating up of the car won't scratch or damage the decal. And you can see they're very intricate, very cool. This is a vehicle I was just working on here. I did a graphic for the what they call a Cryptek Typhon graphic. Came out pretty good. Problem is everybody out there wants, 150, 200 bucks to do any kind of graphics. But I found a cheap and easy way to do this at your home with just a regular inkjet printer or a laser jet printer, or that's pretty much it. So without any further ado, we'll get started. Guys, so the first thing we're going to look at is the type of paper that we're going to use. This is what they call a waterslide. This is the actual inkjet version. This is waterslide clear inkjet. They also have a waterslide laser jet clear decal paper. They also make this in white, so if you're doing external decals, you can kind of follow the same process, except the decal will go on the outside of the vehicle. With the clear, you're going to have to, that's going to be for the inside of the vehicle. You're going to need some clear crystal, or I use this crystal clear enamel. This seems to be works pretty good. Hopefully you can get that. That's a 7701 is the number on there, if you can read it, by Rust-Oleum. You're also going to need some kind of either white or silver or light colored paint. I prefer this Tamiya because it's actually PS1. This actually works well on Lexan. It doesn't crack when it bends. You can get this paper. I usually just get it off eBay from a place called World of Paper. You get 10 sheets for 11 bucks. You can usually do a whole car with a sheet or less. And those are the kind of the supplies. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to use just a Lexan roof panel I was going to do for a buddy. So this is just, standard Lexan that you buy at your local hobby shop. Make sure that you get all your bends and your holes drilled and everything prior to doing any of this decal work. So the first thing I like to do with this particular application, now you don't have to do this, this is just how I like doing it. I actually trace the panels onto just a piece of paper here, and then what I actually end up doing is I scan this in to I actually use I use Photoshop, but you don't have to do any of this. If you just want to print a graphic on a piece of paper and slide it onto the panel, you can certainly do that, but I just do this to get the right size and shape and everything. So that's kind of how you get going on it. I'll pop in a minute and show you some more here. Okay, so I've done all my editing in Photoshop, and I just turned the layer off real quick so you could see what it's going to look like. But there's what the panel outline will look like as we get the graphic put in there. You can see it's going to be a little bit bigger than the panel, and what's going to happen is after I print it off, I'll go ahead and put the panel up onto that, and I'll cut the panel out and get the right size. So we're just going to basically end up printing this on an inkjet printer, simple as day. Now again, you don't have to use this editing program. You can use whatever you want, or you can just get a picture off the internet and put it on this piece of paper and print it and go from there. One thing to remember though is if you are doing lettering or any kind of wording or anything along those lines, or something that is directional, one thing you're going to want to remember, and I just wrote the word demo on there so you can see, is that this is actually going on the inside of the panel. So what you need to do is somehow or some way, or whatever program you're using, you actually need to I'm sorry, let me redo this. You need to rotate or flip whatever you're doing. So when you're reading it normally off this, it's going to look backwards, but when we print it out and when you look on the other side of a clear piece of water slide, it's actually going to appear in the correct orientation. So again, if you've got anything directional or something that any wording or anything, be sure that you flip it so it reads backwards prior to printing it, or else it'll come out backwards on your panel, which you don't want. So hopefully that makes sense. If you have any questions, of course, you can ask in the forum here. So we're going to go ahead and just print this just as you would out of any other program that you would print from. I've got my paper loaded in the correct orientation in the printer. Sorry, it's kind of dark, but this is not anything special. This is just an HP PhotoSmart Plus that I use at the house. You want to use, try to get some high resolution photos when you're doing this, and then of course all your settings in there, set them for high resolution and this kind of thing, photo type printing. And sometimes you don't even have to do that. Sometimes it'll print fine without that. So we'll go ahead and print this, and we'll let you know when it comes out here, and we'll go from there. Guys, here we go. We've got the decal printed onto the inkjet water slide paper. We have it on the correct side. Obviously, you just want to make sure that you do print on the correct side. Obviously this has the writing on the back, so you want to make sure you're on the front, of course. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take our crystal clear enamel here. We're going to put a kind of a base layer coat on it, just real quick and light. And that's kind of it to start. What you want to do is you want to get about, I would recommend maybe 3 coats, 4 at the most. The more coats you put on there, the easier this decal is to handle when you're actually applying it. And I've learned that from mistakes after mistakes. So trust me when I say try like 3 or 4 coats, and it kind of stiffens up the decal. So it also will help it be protected a little bit better as well too. So we'll go ahead and get all these coats on here, and I'll take you to the next step. Okay guys, welcome back. So we've got our clear coat on there. It's nice and dry. Make sure it's very dry before you start doing this part of the steps. We've also got our panel here. So what we're going to do is one thing you got to remember is when you apply this decal, it's actually going to go on the back of the panel. So when this comes off of this paper, it's actually going to affix like this. So unless your panel is exactly perfectly symmetrical, you're going to want to take this step. What I do is actually flip the panel, because this is the side that it's going to be applied to. What I'm going to do is center that, get it about where I want it, or actually exactly where I want it. And then from there I'm going to go ahead and trace the panel out. So it's going to look something like that. I'm going to go ahead and cut this out, just regular scissors. You just want to stay inside this white line. You don't want any of this white to appear. So just stay right inside this white line. Just be real careful and get it as close as you can. So I'll get this cut out and we'll move to the next step. Guys, we're getting closer to seeing some results here, but this is a very important step. You're going to want to have all your stuff ready, because you're going to want to work with the purpose here, because time is against you. But basically you're going to have like a credit card or something to kind of squeegee. Obviously whatever panel you're working on, we've got our cutout decal ready. This is just a kind of a damp cloth, and then this is some warm just tap water. So the first thing we're going to do is peel the back off this panel that we're going to, and remember that we're putting the decal on this back side of it. Then we're going to go ahead and take the decal itself. We're going to submerge it in the water. It's going to want to curl up when it goes in, so just kind of hold it down, and after a few seconds it'll kind of level itself out. I actually like to flip it over. That's going to take probably about 30-45 seconds to get it where we want it. While that's happening, I usually like to take a little bit of water and I just rub it on the back side of this, and this just helps that decal float a little bit while you get it positioned. So that's ready, this is ready. You'll eventually start to feel this decal will want to move around a little bit. And with some of the larger decals like this, what I like to try to do is actually pull up, and that's not quite ready yet. What I like to do, you can see it starting to break away there. I actually like to pull up a corner like this, and I just try to get a bunch of water under it, lay that side back down, and then do this other side. And what you'll see happening is then that will slide around really nice and easily. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and take this, set it on my panel, and then I'm just going to pull this out from underneath it real nice and easy. Now this is where your time starts. So you want to make sure you've got some time you can physically move the decal around to get it exactly where you want it. Obviously we want to try to hit the lines that we hit. Now I'm a little bit bigger, and that's okay. We can go back and correct that. But just get it pretty much where you want it. And once you're there, and I think I'm there now, what we're going to do is just kind of gently hold it here, and we're going to squeegee out all the water. You're just doing this gently. You're not using a lot of pressure. Turn that around. It's nice to have it on a napkin because then you can turn the napkin. You don't have to turn the decal. And just gently squeeze that out. And you want to just get out all the air bubbles. This is where the napkin comes in. I usually just kind of take a damp spot, and I just kind of push down the corners in and around those holes that are on there, and just get all the sides down nice and easy. Don't press too hard because you'll actually wrinkle the decal. And it's looking pretty good. I'm just looking for air bubbles now to see if there's anything obvious. I don't see anything. I think it looks pretty good. So yeah, we're going to let this sit for just a few minutes to let it set up. And I'll take you to the next quick step that we got to do. Okay fellas, so this has been setting up for about 5 minutes now. Looks pretty good. Just kind of watch it. Sometimes those air bubbles aren't as evident right off the bat, and you have to go back and work them. But what I'm going to do is I got an X-Acto knife here, and you want to do this when it's still slightly wet. Reason being is when you're working with this, sometimes an edge can come up, and what you can do is just dab a little bit of water back on it and get it to set back down. But basically I'm just cutting a hole, I'm cutting an X, and you can see right there it popped up a little bit. I'm just cutting an X in these holes so that I can get the tie straps through, or the zip ties through. So I'm just taking a little bit of water and I'm just going back over that a little bit, maybe even get under it. Take my napkin, and that happens pretty much every time. So the sharper the knife here, the better. This one's kind of dull. I should have got a sharper one, but I'm just cutting an X in there so that if you do this when it's dry and it comes up, you'll never get it to sit back down. And I learned that the hard way. So I'm glad I learned it and you did it. But you got probably about 15 minutes to work this thing. So if you've got your edges hanging over at all, you can actually go back. I've found that a really sharp, super sharp X-Acto, and you can just run it along there, and it'll cut off anything you've got. Sometimes actually scissors work pretty good. You can just cut it that way too. I'm a little bit over, but I'm not too worried about it. This is a comp rig, so this thing's going to get beat up. The edges will eventually probably come up a little bit, but the overall graphic will always look pretty good in there. So I got one more hole to cut here. And you can see that edge really wanted to come up, so I'm going to get some water under there. And after I do that, I'm just going to go back and really get that down. Make sure This edge is kind of hanging over a little more than I'd like. Not sure I want to mess with it. I may just put a little bit of water and just kind of fold it over there. It will stick, believe it or not. This stuff is pretty cool, and once you start working with it a little more, you'll start to feel it's actually kind of rubbery. And then when you spray that clear coat on it, it firms it up. So it's relatively easy to work with once you've kind of figured out how to work with it. So what we're going to do is we're going to let this dry. I usually like to wait at least a couple hours. I notice if you put it in front of a fan or something, you can actually get that down to about 15-20 minutes, and it's really dry and ready for the next step. So that's where we're at. We're going to let that dry for a little while and we'll go on. Okay guys, so we're about ready for our next step here, and what we're going to do is basically get this thing to pop. As you can see right now, it's kind of transparent, and that's because of the nature of the clear water slide paper. Now if this was white, you wouldn't see anything unless you were looking at the back, because all you'd see on this side is white. So that's why we got to use clear. But as you can see, our lettering looks right, demo. Everything is in proper orientation, it's centered, so it looks good. So what we're going to do is go ahead and mount this up and get the next step done here. Guys, so basically we're mounted up here. We're going to get our white paint. Now you can use various colors here, but I can tell you this, don't use black, don't use anything dark here, because what will happen is that'll take away from the colors of the actual graphic. So white or silver really are the best. Silver is great for really bright colors like neon green, neon pink, whatever. White is good for your conventional, array of colors. But what you want to do here is we're on the back side. This is the decal side. What we're doing is we're just going to hit it with the light coat here. I'm just going to, put a light coat on, let that dry. Keep doing that. The more coats you put on, the better it's going to pop on the other side. So I'll probably, try to get 3 or 4 coats on there and see where we are from there. Okay, guys. So we've got our panel here. The white's been dry on the back for a little while now. Moment of truth. This is always my favorite part, when you get to pull off this front protection of film. As you can see, and that thing came out pretty sweet, huh? Looks really nice. Our lettering is correct. Demo. Again, this is on the back side, so when you get this panel beat up, it's not going to damage the graphic. Now, I will tell you a couple things. You do kind of want to keep water away from these things. If you get water up under these edges, it will start to peel away a little bit. So if you're washing your rig, just wipe it down with a damp cloth. Don't spray it off, because eventually that'll wear down. But I don't have a ton of experience so far with these. I've been only doing these for a few months now, so in terms of durability, they've been hanging on pretty good. This is my pro rig here, and this has been through several comps already. And you can see, yeah, it's a little bit beat up. That my panel's actually split right there, but you still see the overall graphic pretty good. And so for what it is, it's pretty nice. So anyway, that'll get you going in the right direction. Now there's several other tricks and tips depending on what you're wanting to do. So hang out for a second if you want, or you can end the video now. I'll show you a couple other things. So sometimes you're working with a body like this. This is a deadbolt body, and a buddy of mine wanted to put some graphics on it. Now this part of this is going to be white, and so what I did on the back here is basically just the name of the individual getting the truck. And when I cut this graphic out, what I'm trying to do here is there's a body line right here. I'm trying to hit that body line with that whole panel. Reason being is if you put it on a flat area like this, and you have a graphic that's cut out, that's on the inside right here, you're going to physically see a line where you cut that graphic. So for something like this, you want to try to hit a body line or something. Same with this hood piece. I hit this body line. So again, this looks pretty transparent now, but once he paints the white on the back of this, it's really going to pop, you know, and that's really going to pop too. Something a little more complex. This was kind of my first big plunge into something like this, and I don't know if you can get a good shot of that, but this is actually what they call a Cryptek Typhon Camo, and that actually goes all the way around the back of the truck. Probably should have put it like this, and you can see that basically follows all the way around to the front. There's a small part that's just black here, and then you've got the whole hood panel that's done. Now the way you do that is basically I take some tape like this, and what I do is I mask off the whole area that I'm going to be doing, and once I mask it off, then I go and I basically cut the tape around the whole panel that I'm doing, and I peel it off all in one piece. So for the hood, I ended up something like this. All right, and then you saw the whole process where I put this on a piece of paper, traced it, scanned it in, and then, you know, of course, the rest of the process. Now, I will tell you, this was very tricky getting this graphic on the inside of this vehicle. But what I actually ended up doing on that is after I printed the graphic, before I applied it, because this truck is black, before I applied it to the truck, I actually painted the back side of the graphic, or actually what would be considered the front side where the graphic actually is. I actually painted that with a few coats of white so that it would pop before I put the black coat on the truck. So once that decal went on back here, it was all white. And once it was all applied and ready, then I went back with black paint and painted the whole thing. Now, it was kind of a bitch getting down into all these cracks and crevices and in these corners and all these curved edges. And then especially around the back end up in here, you know, it was a real pain in the butt. But, you know, I got it. And it looks, it's not 1,000,000% perfect. There's a couple little air bubbles in there, but the camera really doesn't do it justice, man. This thing pops. It's badass. So that's another method that you can use. But it's one of those things you're gonna have to learn depending on where you're putting it and what you're putting. You may or may not have to actually paint the graphic before you put it onto the car. And there's a bunch of tips and tricks. So if you have a project and you want some help on it, just make a comment or shoot me an email. I'll post it at the end of this, and I'll try my best to try to help you through it. But just keep in mind when you're printing these things out, usually on your first couple, go ahead and print a couple of sheets because you're going to make a mistake. It happens. I can't even tell you how many I made. But in the end, you get a pretty good result. So, and everybody always asks, how'd you do that? How'd you do that? And you didn't spend, you know, $150. You spent, you know, $11 on some paper and, you know, some ink out of your inkjet printer. I personally like the LaserJet a little bit better. I unfortunately don't have a LaserJet at home. I do use the one at work to do that kind of work, but this is actually a LaserJet print. It just seems to operate better and handle better and lay down better. But so anyway, that's it for now, man. Thanks for watching, guys, and if you have any questions, you know, feel free to ask.